For 50 years, my husband said we couldn't afford a wedding. As long as we're together, that's what matters, Henry would say. I believed him. I thought our love didn't need a certificate, a ceremony, a public declaration. Then at age 70, I saw the photos. Henry dressed in a perfect suit standing at an altar, the whole town cheering. A magnificent wedding, the kind I'd dreamed about for 50 years. He was marrying Paula, the woman he'd loved his entire life. And standing behind them, smiling, applauding as if it were the happiest day of his life, was my son Joseph. I was 70 years old, watching my husband of 50 years marry someone else. When he came home that night, lipstick on his collar, I asked, "Where were you?" He said, "Why are you being so dramatic?" So I played the video. Let me tell you what happened when he realized I knew. For 50 years, Henry Miller and I were never really married. In the beginning, he said we didn't have the money, and as long as we were together, a wedding wasn't important. Later, over the years, he said we'd been together so long that a wedding didn't make sense anymore. But for our 50th anniversary, he organized a magnificent wedding that the whole town talked about. Not with me, but with the woman he had loved his entire life. From a distance, I watched my husband dressed in his best suit, tightly embracing another woman. The crowd applauded, including my own son, Joseph, who celebrated the union as if it were the happiest day of his life. I stood there alone, frozen, thinking about our marriage. 50 years, how much I had endured. From the days when we lived in a cramped 300-square-foot rental apartment to the spacious house with a garden that we had built together. From raising our son Joseph with tireless devotion to caring for our grandson, just as I had once cared for my son. 70 years old, 50 exhausting years. I'd had enough. Henry came home, still in the same suit, except now there was a faint lipstick stain on his collar. Our son Joseph and his family followed close behind. I sat alone on the sofa like a stranger in my own house. No lights were on, no dinner was prepared. When Joseph hit the light switch, the sudden light revealed my silent figure. His voice rose in surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I let out a cold laugh. The question was ridiculous. I had lived in this house for over 40 years, and now my son was wondering why I was here. When I didn't respond, Joseph's tone softened with feigned concern. "Why aren't you in bed? Sitting here in the dark is a bit creepy." I turned to them, my voice firm but cold as ice. "Where were you all today?" Henry, who had just changed his shoes, entered the living room acting clueless. His voice sounded carefree. "What's wrong? You're acting strange today." "I just want to know where you all were. What were you doing?" I couldn't hold back the anger rising inside me any longer. I raised my voice, sharp and demanding. For the first time, I felt truly angry, and everyone stared at me as if they couldn't believe it. "Mom, what's wrong with you? Why are you being so dramatic? We weren't anywhere special. We just had a few errands to run," Joseph said, lying effortlessly. I turned my gaze away from him and directed it at Henry. He didn't bother to speak, silently agreeing with the lie. How pathetic. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, how long would they have kept up this charade? I lifted my phone and played the video. On the screen, Henry stood before the entire town, dressed in his suit, kissing another woman at the altar while the crowd erupted in cheers. "Rebecca, have you been spying on me?" That was his first reaction. No guilt, no remorse, just anger at being caught. His face contorted with rage as he lunged forward, snatched the phone from my hand, and deleted the video. "I can't believe you followed me, Rebecca. I never thought you were that kind of person. We're old. Why are you acting so childish, sneaking around and making baseless accusations? Paula has breast cancer. She doesn't have much time left. Her last wish was to marry me. How could I refuse such a simple wish to a dying friend? We didn't tell you because we didn't want you to worry too much. We didn't want you to get upset over something so insignificant. But here you are, making a scene." I stared at him, and all of this seemed absolutely ridiculous to me. He spoke as if having a magnificent wedding with another woman, something he had never given me in 50 years of marriage, was as trivial as walking a neighbor's dog. Even after being caught, he didn't even try to make it right. Instead, he blamed me for everything. A deep exhaustion settled into my bones. "Come on, Mom," Joseph interjected, his voice full of impatience. "At your age, you should be above this sort of thing. Why are you being so petty? Paula is dying and you're jealous of a dying woman. That's pathetic." I hadn't even spoken yet, but Joseph had already chosen his side. His wife Sophie tugged at his arm, visibly uncomfortable with his words. Joseph, that's enough. Meanwhile, my 1-year-old grandson Jacob broke into frightened screams, scared by the tension in the room. Joseph, who had gotten his son later in life and spoiled him excessively, finally fell silent. But before he stormed off angrily with his family, he threw me an angry look, as if I were the one ruining everything. And so I was left alone with Henry. "Look what you've done," he sighed as he straightened his sleeves before sinking into the sofa. "You had to bring up the subject in front of everyone. Now the whole house is upset." I was done playing his game. Calmly, I reached into my bag, pulled out the divorce papers I had already prepared, and laid them on the coffee table. "Henry, let's get divorced." His facial expression was almost amusing, shock, as if he truly believed I would swallow his excuses and forgive the man who had stood at the altar with another woman. "Rebecca, stop with the tantrums," he snapped. "We're over 70 years old. We're not young people anymore. Can't you just let it go?" He was right about one thing. We weren't young people anymore. I had never thought that at this stage of life I would face the brutal reality that the man I had spent half a century with was nothing but a liar and a coward. But that's exactly why I couldn't waste another moment with him. "Exactly," I said with a firm voice. "We're not young people anymore. That's why I have to leave. I refuse to spend the rest of my life feeling abandoned, unloved, and unwanted. I won't let my final years be filled only with regret. So we're done. I've packed my things. What's left you can keep. I'm leaving in the morning." Henry stared at me, a complicated mixture of emotions in his eyes. He looked hesitantly at the divorce papers. "Do we really want to end it like this?" I didn't answer. I simply turned around, ready to go to the guest room when he suddenly called me back. "All right, I'll sign. I admit I made a mistake. I shouldn't have hidden it. If you ever need anything, you can still contact me. Let's part on good terms. We'll remain friends." I just shook my head without looking back. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I dragged my suitcase to the door. Joseph was already up. He saw me, he saw the suitcase, and yet he didn't offer to help his 70-year-old mother with her luggage. His only concern was, "Mom, you're being ridiculous. You and Dad were always together. How can you just divorce him like that? Who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Who's going to take care of Jacob? You're making a scene out of nothing. Dad just did something good for Paula. They didn't do anything else. Why are you being so irrational?" As Joseph continued with his incessant accusations, I finally saw him for who he really was, an ungrateful, selfish man. A son I had raised for over 30 years, only to realize now that I had spent my life raising nothing but an ingrate. I had almost lost my life when I brought him into the world, an amniotic fluid embolism. It was a miracle that both of us survived that day. I lay nearly dying in a hospital bed just to bring him into this world, and when he was little, he was everything a mother could wish for, obedient, kind, and loving. It was the same boy who once swore he would protect me when he grew up, but now that same boy was the one saying goodbye to me, the one causing me more pain than I could bear. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. Every second in his presence, every word he spoke only deepened my disappointment. Without looking at him again, I struggled to push my suitcase to the door, quickly changed my shoes, and stepped out. 70 years of life, and finally I had learned how fleeting everything is. I left the house with a single suitcase. The rest, none of it mattered. Joseph, frustrated that I wasn't responding, grabbed an empty glass from the counter and threw it into the trash. The loud sound of shattering glass echoed through the room, sharp and final. That's how our bond as mother and son broke, without hope of repair. I turned one last time at the door to look at him, but in doing so, the affection I still felt for him completely dissolved. "Joseph Miller, I am not your servant, I am your mother. What makes you think it's my duty to cook for you, clean for you, and serve you? Maybe I spoiled you too much all these years. That's why you've become like this. You've disappointed me, Joseph. I hope after I'm gone, you take a moment to think about everything I've done for this family. And with that, I'm done." I didn't care if he had more to say. I didn't care if he wanted to argue. I turned around and left. Even after I stepped out, I could still hear the slamming of doors in the house, but that was no longer my concern. The moment I stepped through that door, I stopped living for them. I left Henry Miller's house and returned to an apartment that was still in my name. Sitting alone in that quiet space, I looked back on the past decades and realized that none of it had really belonged to me. I'd met Henry through a mutual friend. He was a year older than me. Back then, he was fresh out of college, while I was just a girl who had started working right after high school to survive on my own. For almost 5 years, I had struggled. Henry was young, good-looking, and considerate. Back then, he worried that we wouldn't have much in common due to our different educational backgrounds, so I stayed up night after night studying topics that interested him, just so he wouldn't see me as inadequate. I knew he had a 3-year long-term relationship behind him, a love he never had the chance to preserve. She had broken up with him because the long-distance relationship became too difficult. I held no grudge against her. Instead, I felt sorry for her. I pitied the effort he had put into that relationship, only to be left. So I made myself a promise. I would compensate him for what he had lost. I would love him the way his ex never had. When he was absorbed in his thesis, I stayed with him in the library and helped him gather information. When he had trouble finding work after graduation, I ironed his shirts, polished his shoes, and accompanied him to every job interview. When work became hard and he came home drunk from company dinners, I cleaned him up, changed his clothes, and stayed by his side all night. I thought he had married me because my devotion, my love, had finally reached him. We spent 50 years together. It wasn't a passionate romance, but a stable relationship. We didn't fight much, but we also didn't have a love story worth remembering. Looking back, I was never his choice. I was simply the woman he settled for after he lost the one he really wanted. And the moment she reappeared, he went to her without hesitation, without a second thought. But none of that mattered to me anymore, because I still had time, and for the rest of my years, I wouldn't waste a single moment more on him. When news of my divorce spread, my friends were shocked, but they didn't judge. They didn't question my decision or try to talk me out of it. Instead, they simply stood by my side, as they always had. Joseph, on the other hand, wouldn't let it go. He sent me message after message, repeating the same nonsense over and over, telling me I was too old to think clearly, that I would embarrass the family if I insisted on this divorce, that I would regret it one day, but his words no longer had any effect on me. A few days later, I blocked his number completely. Without Henry and Joseph in my life, my days became blissfully simple. For the first time in decades, I only had to think about myself. What I wanted to eat, what I wanted to do. I didn't have to fulfill anyone's expectations or put the needs of others above my own. After a month of peaceful solitude, I made a decision. I would travel. The thought came to me unexpectedly one afternoon as I sat in my apartment watching a travel agency commercial on television. Suddenly, I remembered who I was before Henry, before marriage, before motherhood. I had dreams. I worked hard, not just to survive, but because I wanted to see the world. I wanted to travel, everywhere my heart led me, but then life got in the way. I put Henry first, my family first, and my dream of traveling was buried, forgotten, gathering dust in a dark corner of my mind. Even the trips I took over the years were never really mine. I went where Henry wanted to go, where Joseph wanted to go, and yet I never had the freedom to simply enjoy. I was always the one taking care of them, making sure they were happy, that everything ran smoothly. Not this time. This time, it was about me. Before I could change my mind, I picked up my phone and booked a group tour. It was the best decision I ever made. For the first time in my life, I was traveling for myself. I tried foods I had never eaten before, saw breathtaking landscapes I never thought I would see with my own eyes. And along the way, I met women like me. Women who had spent their lives putting others first, only to find themselves alone in their final years. But they weren't bitter or resentful. On the contrary, they were full of life. By the end of the trip, we had already made plans to stay in touch. Some of them even talked about moving to the same senior living community so we could spend our golden years together. Every day of the trip, I took photos of the places I visited, of the moments I wanted to capture, and shared them on Instagram so my friends could see what I was doing. Their comments came in waves, full of excitement and relief. They had been worried about me, afraid I might not get over the divorce. But seeing me like this, traveling, smiling, flourishing, finally eased their worries. The only downside? Henry still followed my account. He liked every post. Sometimes he even left comments saying how glad he was to see me enjoying myself. But to me, it was all just for show, a pathetic attempt to ease his own guilt. I ignored every one of his interactions, refusing to let his presence dampen my joy. I didn't care what he thought. It didn't matter whether he was sincere or not, whether he regretted his decisions or not. That had nothing to do with me anymore. The only thing that mattered was whether I was happy. And I was truly, genuinely happy. After a month of traveling, I finally returned home. The moment my plane landed, exhaustion overcame me, but I knew there was still much to do. Unpack suitcases, clean, settle back in. Before I tackled that, I decided to go out briefly. There was a small cafe downstairs that I often visited. A hot latte and a simple pastry seemed like the perfect way to ease back into normal life. But the moment I opened the cafe door, I saw an unexpected visitor. I had never seen her in person before. She looked at me with a knowing smile before she spoke. "You must be Rebecca, right? You look better in person. Not quite as old as Henry said you were." Paula sat before me in a perfectly tailored dress. She had taken care with her hair and makeup, obviously intending to make an impression. She smiled at me as if we were old friends, and her face radiated a trace of smugness. Her compliment sounded almost sarcastic, especially given the contrast between her polished appearance and mine. Fresh back from a long trip, too tired to even freshen up, I probably looked like a wrinkled old woman next to her. Wasn't Paula supposedly in the final stages of breast cancer? From the outside, she didn't look sick at all. I didn't return her compliment, so she laughed awkwardly, and then took on a gentle, soothing tone as she spoke again. "Hello, I'm Paula, a longtime friend of Henry's. He's spoken of you often, but we never had the opportunity to meet in person. I heard you just got back from a long trip. You must be exhausted." I sat down across from her with an expressionless face, only nodding in response, with no interest in continuing the conversation. But Paula, as if ignoring my indifference, continued speaking as if I had said nothing. "You must be tired and nostalgic after being away so long, right? At our age, we become more sentimental. Life has been long, full of gains and losses. Henry and I, for example, had to end our relationship because the distance was too difficult. Honestly, we always had feelings for each other, but we let it go because it was too painful." She paused, her smile deepening, her eyes gleaming with an almost proud, melancholic expression. "Now, after all these years, we're both old and gray. We don't want to leave any regrets between us." At that, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "So, to make up for your past romantic regrets, I'm supposed to voluntarily give up nearly 50 years of my life and let you two be together. Right?" I said, my voice full of sarcasm. "Rebecca, I know we've wronged you," she began, as if she hadn't heard me at all. "But who can control feelings? A few months ago, I was falsely diagnosed with breast cancer. When I got the news, I felt my world collapsing. I panicked and contacted Henry. I thought he wouldn't even want to see me. But to my surprise, he came to me." A soft smile crossed Paula's face, one that radiated joy and a hint of pride, as if she expected me to react to their love story. But I didn't care. I wasn't interested. Nevertheless, she continued speaking without noticing my lack of response. "You don't know how scared he was when he heard about my cancer diagnosis. He hugged me and cried for a long time. It touched me so much. After all these years, I didn't expect Henry to still have feelings for me." She leaned forward, her voice becoming more animated as she continued. "That's why when I asked him to organize a big wedding for us, he was as excited as a little boy. He promised I would be the happiest bride in the world, and he was the one constantly running back and forth, taking care of all the wedding preparations for us." I raised an eyebrow, understanding why Henry had been working late every day for the past few months. Everything was for her, for their wedding. Everything had been right in front of me, but I'd been too numb from all the years of monotony to see it. I lost my patience. I couldn't stand listening to this woman brag about how much my ex-husband loved her any longer. So I interrupted her, unable to hear any more. "You don't need to tell me about your love life. Honestly, I'm not interested, and whatever happens between you two from now on has nothing to do with me." With that, I stood up, called the waiter to pay, grabbed my wrapped croissant, and headed home. "Are you in such a hurry to leave?" "I have so much more to say," Paula said with a hint of pain in her voice. "But if you don't want to listen, that's okay. I said too much and upset you." Her false pretense made me sick. Since she had challenged it herself, I had no reason to show her any more pity. I paused, turned around, and spoke with a firm voice directly into Paula's overly dramatic face. Seriously, at your age, can't you maintain at least some dignity? The thing is, knowing full well that Henry was married, you stole my husband and married him without any shame. You're openly the third person in our marriage. You don't need to dress up your twisted love story with all this chatter. If you really loved him, you waited 50 years to finally be together. What were you two doing all that time? My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and firm. Suddenly, the attention of the entire cafe turned to our table. Paula closed her mouth tightly. Her eyes began to redden, and once again she played the victim role to gain sympathy. Rebecca, what are you saying? At that moment, Henry burst in, disheveled and frantic. When he saw Paula's swollen eyes, he rushed to her and hugged her tightly. His concern was so exaggerated it turned my stomach. I know you're suffering, but it's not Paula's fault, he said with a defensive voice. If you're angry, take it out on me, not her. I was about to laugh with disbelief. What audacity from him. The two of them had done wrong, but somehow I was getting the blame. Then suddenly, someone from the other side of the cafe spoke up. I think I saw you on the internet recently. Didn't you just have a big public wedding? The cafe fell silent for a moment before the murmurs began, whispers that quickly turned into full-blown discussions. All eyes turned to me, and their expressions changed as they processed what they had heard. Suddenly, I was no longer Henry's rightful wife, no longer the woman who had been married for 50 years and raised a family. To them, I was just a bitter, shameless old woman trying to destroy a love story that had developed over decades. The conversations around me grew louder, and soon the accusations began. What a shame. At her age, she's still trying to steal another woman's man. Exactly. Paula and Henry are the real couple. They've been in love for years. This woman just can't let him go. Look at her, so aggressive, trying to fight. No wonder he left her. The words were cutting, merciless. In the eyes of these strangers, I had somehow become the homewrecker. Henry, who had been standing still in the middle of the chaos, seemed to hesitate, perhaps even thinking about setting things straight. His gaze wandered to me, filled with something that almost looked like guilt. But Paula wasn't ready to allow that. Now she had the upper hand, and she would make sure I bore the weight of every insult thrown at me. Right on cue, she grabbed her chest. Her face contorted in pain as she weakly sank into Henry's arms. Henry, I don't feel well. What if the doctors were right? What if the cancer diagnosis wasn't a mistake after all? And just like that, Paula collapsed in his arms, pretending to faint. Henry immediately panicked. Any guilt he had felt, any intention to defend me, dissolved in an instant. Paula, stay with me. He didn't even look at me. He didn't care that I had just been humiliated moments before. He didn't care that I had been wrongly accused in front of a whole cafe. His only concern was Paula. He lifted her into his arms and ran to the exit, shouting for someone to call an ambulance. The bystanders who had been gossiping about me just moments ago now rushed to help, pulling out their phones and offering to call for support. And me? I was nothing. Nobody cared about my side of the story. Nobody wanted to hear the truth. I stood there for a moment, watching the scene unfold. Then I turned around and left. There was no point in staying in that miserable place for another second. When I returned to my empty apartment, I barely had the strength to take off my coat before I sank onto the sofa. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I allowed myself to cry. I cried until my chest ached. I cried for all the years I had wasted, for the humiliation I had suffered, for the pure, tormenting injustice of it all. Henry was a selfish, heartless bastard. He had pushed me aside, trampled on our decades of marriage, and now he didn't even have the decency to acknowledge what I had gone through. He didn't care that I was ridiculed, that strangers tore me apart with their words. Why? Why did he have to act like he was the victim? Why did I, his wife of 50 years, have to endure the humiliation of being called a homewrecker? And worst of all, why did I have nothing to prove I was ever part of his life? The realization hit me like a blow to the stomach. In 50 years of marriage, Henry and I had never gotten married. In our early years, when money was tight, we barely took any photos together. Later, when we moved, I left behind the few photos we had. At this point, the only undeniable proof of our relationship was the son we shared, Joseph Miller. That ungrateful, selfish excuse for a son. But even Joseph had long since turned away from me. I knew he had heard what happened at the cafe. I knew it because my phone wouldn't stop ringing with his messages. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody showed concern about what had happened. No, Joseph had only one thing to say. He called me cruel, a vindictive, spiteful old woman. He accused me of making a scene, of pushing Paula too hard, of causing her fainting spell. Why did you have to do that, Mom? What was the point of making things worse? Paula was nice to you, and you just wanted to cause drama. What's wrong with you? You don't even care that you almost sent her back to the hospital, do you? That was my son, the boy I had almost died to bring into the world, the boy I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for, and now he was calling me a monster. At that moment, I had no choice but to face the truth I had avoided for too long. I had made so many mistakes in my life. I had married the wrong man. I had given birth to the wrong son, and I had wasted 50 years on people who never really loved me. In this digital age, scandals spread faster than wildfires. What happened at the cafe, my confrontation with Paula, her dramatic fainting spell, Henry rushing her to the hospital, was filmed by curious bystanders. Within hours, the video had gone viral. But of course, the video didn't contain my accusations against Paula. No. The clip circulating online only showed Henry scolding me, wanting to know why I was tormenting his beloved Paula. And the person who uploaded it didn't even try to be neutral. They directly portrayed it as a scene where Henry heroically defended his true love from a jealous, vindictive ex-wife. Imagine that. Years of marriage betrayed and thrown away. And now I was being portrayed as the mistress. The comments were merciless. Hundreds, no, thousands of strangers attacked me, calling me despicable, pathetic, shameless. An old woman trying to destroy a beautiful love story. How disgusting. She had her chance and Henry has obviously moved on. Why is she still clinging to him? Paula is so elegant and kind, and yet this bitter ex-wife harasses her. What a shame. I tried once, just once, to post an explanation, to tell my side, to tell the truth. But my words were immediately drowned out by waves of new comments, new insults that buried my voice before it could be heard. And maybe if things had continued like that, the internet would have moved on in a few days. People would have forgotten me and found a new scandal to occupy themselves with. But then Joseph, the son to whom I had dedicated my life, drove the final nail into the coffin. At the height of the controversy, when my name was still trending in the worst way, he posted a photo online. Not a photo of me, not even an old family photo with Henry. No, it was a photo of Paula and Henry holding hands, looking deeply into each other's eyes. Behind them stood Joseph and his wife, smiling, a happy, perfect family, and beneath it the caption, "As long as my family is united, that's all that matters." My own son publicly chose them over me. For the internet, that was the proof they needed. If my own son supported Paula, I was clearly the problem. I watched helplessly as the hate against me escalated. Not even her son wants her around. That says it all. She must have been a nightmare wife and mother if her family abandoned her like that. This is embarrassing. Imagine being so hated that your own son turns against you. I didn't know how to fight back. I asked my friends to speak up for me, to post the truth, but it didn't matter. Their words were drowned out, ignored, just like my marriage, just like my place in my own family. And then I stopped trying. For days, I barely left my apartment. I isolated myself from the world and learned to endure the loneliness. I spent my time in silence, trying to put the broken pieces of myself back together, but then something unexpected happened. The women I had met on my trip, the friends I had found me. One afternoon, they showed up at my door unannounced. When they saw the state I was in, sunken eyes, exhausted, completely drained from the weight of everything, they all reacted with the same passionate outrage. "Dear friend, we were only separated for a week and now this. I can't believe what they've done to you." It doesn't matter what the internet says. We know the truth. That woman has the word liar written on her forehead. And Henry, an old fool running around playing the romantic hero as if he's still 20. Pathetic. And don't even get me started on your son. He posted that photo just to humiliate you. Absolutely unforgivable. When I heard them speak up for me without hesitation, without doubt, I broke down. The floodgates opened, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I was sad, but because I was overwhelmed. These women, whom I had only known for a month, believed in me more than the people I had loved my entire life. And when the tears dried up, when my breathing calmed down, I let it all out. I told them everything. Every injustice, every betrayal, every moment I had spent doing the impossible for people who never appreciated me. When I was finished, something in me had changed, as if a weight I had carried too long had finally been lifted. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and sat up straight. To hell with Henry, I declared with a new lightness in my voice. Let him stay with Paula. I wouldn't take him back even if he begged me. And Joseph, that ungrateful bastard, if he wants Paula as a mother, fine, he can have her. I'm done with him too. My friends exchanged relieved glances. We were afraid you wouldn't be able to let go, one of them admitted. But seeing you like this, we should have known better. Enough about these losers, another added. Let's talk about us. Are we still thinking about moving into that senior living community together? Outside, the gray clouds that had hung there for days had finally begun to clear. Sunlight streamed through my apartment window, warm and golden. And inside, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. We sat together, laughed, talked, made plans for the future, not just for the senior living community, but for our next trip, because there was still so much of the world to see. And this time, I would live for myself. Day by day, my life slowly returned to calm. Meanwhile, Henry's world sank into chaos. The moment our divorce was finalized, Paula wasted no time moving into Henry Miller's house. At first, everything seemed perfect. Joseph, blinded by Paula's refined appearance, treated her like a second mother, convinced she was more graceful, more elegant, and more dignified than me. And Henry, still caught up in the fantasy of his revived romance, worshipped her endlessly. But illusions never last long, and soon the facade crumbled. Without me in the house, there was no one to cook, clean, or make sure everything ran smoothly. Joseph, unwilling to spend money on a housekeeper or trust a stranger in his home, subtly hinted that Paula should take over. After all, wasn't it natural for the woman of the house to handle domestic duties? To gain their approval, Paula briefly made an effort. She tried to cook, clean, and even take care of Joseph's son. But Paula was no housewife. She had spent her life being taken care of, not taking care of others. She had neither the interest in learning nor the patience for housework. The results were catastrophic. Her food was bland, burned, or dangerously undercooked. Within a week, Henry and Joseph lost several pounds and nearly got food poisoning that almost sent them to the hospital. The laundry she left wet in the washing machine for hours, sometimes days, until it started to smell and had to be washed again. As for childcare, she was more interested in watching television than keeping an eye on little Jacob. He fell, hit his head, sometimes screamed himself hoarse from crying while she sat on the sofa without noticing. The straw that broke the camel's back came one evening when she prepared Jacob's bottle with boiling hot water without cooling it down. The baby screamed in pain, and the whole family spent the night in the emergency room. That was the moment Joseph lost his temper. You don't work, you don't bring in any money, and yet you can't even take care of a child. What are you good for? He screamed, his eyes filled with anger. Paula, already fed up with the endless tasks and complaints, immediately exploded. Oh, so now it's my fault. Maybe you should think about your own failings, like the fact that you're a grown man too cheap to hire a housekeeper. And let me remind you that I am your father's wife, not the Miller family servant. I don't owe you anything. Joseph, now completely beside himself with rage, pointed at her with a trembling finger. Wife? What wife? You're nothing but a failed mistress who managed to worm her way into this house. And don't forget, you and my father aren't even legally married. As far as I'm concerned, you're not family. Paula's face contorted with anger. Oh, now you care about family. Where was this energy when you and your father forced Rebecca to leave? What's wrong? Do you regret it now? Are you thinking about begging her to come back? She grabbed Henry's arm, desperately seeking support, but Henry, tired and defeated, remained silent. He just stood there, His face darkened with exhaustion, unwilling to take sides. For the first time, it seemed even he was tired of the endless fighting. The screaming match continued in the emergency room and became so loud that a doctor had to intervene to quiet them down. They didn't listen. It wasn't until hospital security was called that they were forced to leave. Unfortunately for them, a bystander had filmed everything. Within hours, the video was uploaded to the internet, where it exploded. And this time, the internet saw the truth. People put the puzzle pieces together. This was the same Paula from the previous viral scandal. The poor innocent woman Henry had protected from his evil ex-wife turned out to be nothing more than a manipulative homewrecker. The outrage was immediate. People dug up my old explanation, which everyone had ignored. And now my story finally had an audience. Let me get this straight. This woman destroyed a 50-year marriage and then portrayed herself as a victim. Henry and his son left a real wife and mother for this. Joseph Miller is the worst. He publicly humiliated his own mother just to praise a mistress. Absolutely disgusting. Rebecca, if you ever see this, we believe you. You deserved better than these terrible people. The reaction was swift and brutal. Henry, Joseph, and Paula became public enemies overnight. Joseph's job in sales relied heavily on his reputation, and after this incident, his boss conveniently found a reason to fire him. With his now toxic name, he couldn't find another job. Unemployed and frustrated, he spent his days at home, arguing endlessly with Paula and threatening to throw her out. Henry, caught in the middle, could do nothing. On one side was the woman he thought was the love of his life, but on the other side was his only son, whose life had been destroyed because of Paula. No matter what choice he made, he lost. So instead, he simply gave up. He spent his days staring out the window and sighing endlessly. Meanwhile, Joseph's wife Sophie became the only functioning adult in the household. She worked full-time and then came home to cook, clean, and take care of her son. Completely overworked and exhausted, she finally couldn't take it anymore. She reached out to me. "Mom, when are you coming back? We need you. The house is falling apart without you." Her message came at the exact moment I was twirling in the arms of a charming man I had met at the dance hall. I looked at my phone, grinned mockingly, turned it over, and ignored it. I was finally living for myself, and I wasn't going back. Ferdinand was a man my age. His wife had died 10 years ago, and although he had never remarried, he found solace in dancing. At the dance hall, he was irregular, warm, elegant, and effortlessly charming. People were drawn to him, attracted by his kindness. That evening, he patiently guided me through a dance step, correcting my posture with the same gentle encouragement I had once given Henry when I led him step by step to his success. But the peace didn't last. Sophie had mentioned that since I wasn't responding to their messages, Joseph was getting impatient, and as expected, he found me. The moment he saw me dancing, laughing, and enjoying myself with Ferdinand, his face contorted with rage. "Mom, what are you doing?" He stormed forward, pushed Ferdinand aside, and positioned himself between us. "The house is a total mess, and you're here dancing with a stranger." I ignored him and walked past him to check on Ferdinand. "I'm so sorry," I said gently. Ferdinand just smiled, waved it off as if nothing had happened. "Don't worry. If you need me, I'm here." Joseph, seeing that I wasn't even acknowledging his outburst, stuck to me like glue. "Mom, you're not young anymore. It's not safe to live alone, let alone go to a retirement home. Nothing is more comfortable than your own home. I'm taking you home right now. A big dinner is waiting for you. Dad misses you. He talks about you all the time and asks me to bring you back. Any misunderstanding between you two, you just need to talk. Couples fight. That's normal." He talked and talked. His voice grated on my nerves. "Stop it, Joseph. My ears hurt from listening to you. Before he could object, my sisters arrived, my wonderful group of friends who had supported me through everything. They all smiled when they saw me, but the moment their eyes landed on Joseph, their expressions changed. Their warmth transformed into cold, cutting sarcasm. Well, well, well. What wind brought this guy here? The same Joseph who ignored his mother's pleas before. What a miracle. I knew they wanted to take revenge on my behalf. I didn't stop them. In fact, I smiled and added, "Exactly. A dead man suddenly coming back to life is really scary." Joseph's face darkened at my words, but my friends weren't finished yet. "Let's not forget, you're the one who threw your mother out of the house. You're the one who welcomed the homewrecker into your home, and now you come crawling back. How funny. Your mama is thriving. She has us. She has new friends. And let's be honest, she's having a lot more fun now than she ever did living as your unpaid maid. Fun isn't even the right word. She's thrilled. Meanwhile, your home is falling apart. Seems like someone is jealous that his mother is happier without him." They laughed, and I laughed with them. It was delicious. I had suffered in that house for decades, only to realize that the moment I left, I had won. I had my freedom, my peace, my happiness. And they, Joseph, Paula, Henry, were miserable. Joseph opened his mouth, hesitated, then forced himself to swallow his pride. His voice became whiny. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me just this once? Paula is gone. I threw her out of the house. You don't have to worry anymore. You can come home now." I just shook my head. "I'm not going back." Joseph's face collapsed, and then, to my complete disbelief, he fell to his knees right there in front of everyone, crying like a child. Theatrics upon theatrics, and I was done watching this performance. My friends sighed, unimpressed. One of them grabbed my arm and began pulling me away. "Come on, let's not waste time on him. Let's dance." I let them lead me away without hesitation, because the truth was, since Henry and Joseph decided to choose Paula over me, they had stopped mattering, and I had a life to live. Just as we were about to leave, Joseph's phone rang. It was Sophie. I don't know what she said, but whatever it was, it shocked Joseph so much that the phone slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. For a long moment, he stood there, frozen, his face colorless. A terrible thought came over me. It's not Jacob, is it? My grandson was innocent in all of this. No matter what happened between his father and me, I would never want anything to happen to him. Joseph, answer me. What happened? Is it Jacob? I was desperate, ready to shake him if necessary. But no matter how many times I asked, he just stood there, stunned and without an answer. Minutes passed before he finally reacted. And when he did, tears ran down his face and his whole body trembled as he let out a heart-wrenching sob. "Mom, please come with me to the hospital." His voice broke. "Dad had a stroke. His condition is critical. The doctor says he might not make it." Despite everything, despite all the resentment I had built up, my heart still hesitated, for a moment. I had spent half a century by Henry's side. Even if he had hurt me, even if I no longer loved him, I couldn't deny what we had once shared. I stood there, torn, caught between past and present. Should I go? Should I even care? My friends sensed my hesitation and intervened with gentle but firm voices. "Rebecca, if you want to go, then go. We know you've moved on, but that doesn't mean you can erase 50 years overnight." That's right. Whether you care about seeing him one last time won't change the life you've built for yourself. But if you don't go, you might regret it later. They were right. I wasn't doing this for Henry. I was doing it for myself. So without another word, I followed Joseph to the hospital to say goodbye. It had been months since I last saw Henry. And yet there he was, hooked up to machines, his frail body covered with cables and monitors, still unconscious. Through the glass window of the hospital room, I stood motionless. Sophie looked at me with pleading eyes, held my hand as she whispered, "Mom." I didn't respond. I didn't go in. I just stood there and looked at the man lying in that bed. To say I felt nothing would be a lie. Years of marriage, no matter how much pain they had brought me, couldn't be erased so easily. It wasn't love anymore, but it was something else. Something closer to familiarity. The weight of a shared history that pressed on my chest. Joseph, on the other hand, was inconsolable. He crouched on the floor, sobbing, grabbing his hair as he repeated, "How? How did this happen? Dad was fine this morning. How did this happen?" At that, Sophie's face darkened and her frustration broke through. "Isn't it obvious? It's because of that woman. She's the reason Henry ended up like this." My stomach turned. "What happened? Tell me everything," Sophie snorted, her voice full of contempt. "You have no idea how terrible that woman really is." She exhaled sharply and began to explain. "After we threw her out, she disappeared for a few days. We thought she was gone for good, but no. Suddenly she showed up with an old man we'd never seen before and paraded him in front of Henry. Henry was furious. He told her to leave and never come back. But today she came again, with disheveled hair and looking completely unhinged. I was at home, but I thought it was their business, so I stayed upstairs and didn't interfere." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I heard everything. She wanted to reconcile, to come back. Henry refused. Then she threatened him, said if he didn't take her back, she would never leave." She hesitated, her hands trembling. I couldn't take it anymore, so I finally went downstairs to confront her. But before I reached her, I heard the argument escalate. Then a loud crash. By the time I got there, she was already gone. And Henry... Her breathing caught. Henry was lying unconscious on the floor. Blood was pooling around his head. He had hit the corner of the table when he fell. I panicked, immediately called an ambulance, but it was too late. The doctor said it was a stroke. Joseph, trembling with rage, jumped up and ran toward the exit. "I'm going to find her myself. I'm going to make her pay." Sophie blocked him. "I already called the police. You need to stay here and wait until your father wakes up." My gaze wandered back to Henry's lifeless body, still motionless in his hospital bed. I sighed, a long, tired sigh. I wasn't sure what I felt. Pity, resentment, closure. Then suddenly, "Who is Rebecca? The patient keeps calling for her." A doctor rushed out, scanning the room. I raised my hand slightly. "That's me. Come quickly," he urged. He just regained consciousness, but his condition is critical. "He keeps asking for you." One last time, I thought. One final encounter, and then we would be done forever. When I entered, Henry struggled to lift his hand, as if he wanted to reach for me, but his body was too weak, and he could only stare. "Rebecca, you came." His voice was barely a whisper. "I thought you would never want to see me again." I didn't respond. I simply walked to the nightstand to pour him a glass of warm water. No, don't do that." He weakly shook his head. "You don't have to do anything for me anymore. I'm the one who failed you." His voice broke as tears ran down his wrinkled cheeks. "Rebecca, all these days I've finally realized how good you were to me. I was blind, selfish. I never appreciated you until it was too late," he cried. I set the cup on the table. There was no longer any need to serve him. "Henry," I said with a firm voice, "I know you want my forgiveness, but I won't give it to you." His lips trembled, and his eyes filled with regret. "You wasted 50 years of my life. How could I forgive you for that?" He fell silent. Slowly, his expression crumbled under the weight of his own guilt. But I continued. "I don't hate you either. I just want us to live separately, never interfering in each other's lives again. Paula destroyed you, and you should focus on recovering and staying away from her. As for me, I'm fine. I'm living for myself now. I eat what I want. I go where I want. I surround myself with people who truly care about me. I don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. And for the first time in my life, I'm happy." I wasn't lying. The smile on my face wasn't forced. I had never been this happy. Henry noticed it too. His fingers trembled, but he said nothing. I turned to leave. "Rebecca," I paused without looking back. "Rebecca, if there's a next life, would you marry me again?" I barely hesitated before answering. "No. In my next life, I'll marry someone who loves me, not someone whose heart belongs to someone else." Henry let out a choked cough, but he didn't object, because we both knew I had already moved on. When I left the hospital, I felt lighter than I had in years. For a long time, I had been shackled by the weight of my past, by a marriage that had taken more than it gave, by a son who had valued convenience over love, by a life that never really felt like mine. But now I was free, and for the first time, I embraced that freedom with all my heart. The next day, I packed my suitcases. My friends and I had been talking for weeks about taking another trip together, and after everything, I knew there was no better time than now. We booked a month-long cruise through Europe, Italy, Greece, Spain, and France. Just the thought of it made me euphoric, like a girl preparing for her first great adventure. We boarded in Barcelona. The salty sea breeze brushed against our skin as we stood on deck and watched the coastline disappear. "To new beginnings," one of my friends toasted, raising her wine glass. "To freedom," another added, "and to never wasting even 1 second of our lives on a man again," I added, laughing. We spent our days enjoying the beauty of new places. In Rome, we strolled through the ancient ruins of the Colosseum. The weight of history surrounded us as we followed the footsteps of long-gone civilizations. In Santorini, we watched the sun merge with the Aegean Sea, painting the sky in golden and purple tones, while we drank refreshing white wine from a small family winery. In Paris, we savored the most decadent pastries in a small cafe away from the busy tourist crowds, laughing about stories of our youth, about old loves and lost dreams, and about the amazing lives we were still building for ourselves. And the whole time, I documented every moment. I filled my phone with photos, not for anyone else, not for validation, but for me. Because this was my life now. A life where I woke up every morning with excitement instead of fear. A life where I no longer had to ask permission to be happy. In the quiet moments, when I sat by the water or under the glow of the Eiffel Tower, something became clear to me. I wasn't just happy, I was at peace. The months passed, and my friendships deepened. We were no longer just travel companions, we were family. And as for love, well, it found me when I least expected it. Ferdinand and I stayed in touch after that night at the dance hall. When I returned from my trip, he invited me to dinner, not as friends, but as something more. And for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to feel again. He was patient, kind. Unlike Henry, he never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. We danced, we talked for hours, and slowly, effortlessly, love returned to my life. Not the kind of love that demands sacrifice, but the kind that celebrates freedom, individuality, and mutual respect. One night, as we stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he turned to me and asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't hesitate, more than I ever thought possible. And that was the truth. I had lost so much, but in the end, I had gained something much greater. Myself. M. When I left the hospital, I felt lighter than I had in years. For a long time, I had been shackled by the weight of my past, by a marriage that had taken more than it gave, by a son who had valued convenience over love, by a life that never really felt like mine. But now I was free. And for the first time, I embraced that freedom with all my heart. The next day, I packed my suitcases. My friends and I had been talking for weeks about taking another trip together, and after everything, I knew there was no better time than now. We booked a month-long cruise through Europe, Italy, Greece, Spain, and France. Just the thought of it made me euphoric, like a girl preparing for her first great adventure. We boarded in Barcelona. The salty sea breeze brushed against our skin as we stood on deck and watched the coastline disappear. "To new beginnings," one of my friends toasted, raising her wine glass. "To freedom," another added, "and to never wasting even 1 second of our lives on a man again," I added, laughing. We spent our days enjoying the beauty of new places. In Rome, we strolled through the ancient ruins of the Colosseum. The weight of history surrounded us as we followed the footsteps of long-gone civilizations. In Santorini, we watched the sun merge with the Aegean Sea, painting the sky in golden and purple tones, while we drank refreshing white wine from a small family winery. In Paris, we savored the most decadent pastries in a small cafe away from the busy tourist crowds, laughing about stories of our youth, about old loves and lost dreams, and about the amazing lives we were still building for ourselves. And the whole time, I documented every moment. I filled my phone with photos, not for anyone else, not for validation, but for me. Because this was my life now. A life where I woke up every morning with excitement instead of fear. A life where I no longer had to ask permission to be happy. In the quiet moments, when I sat by the water or under the glow of the Eiffel Tower, something became clear to me. I wasn't just happy, I was at peace. The months passed, and my friendships deepened. We were no longer just travel companions, we were family. And as for love, well, it found me when I least expected it. Ferdinand and I stayed in touch after that night at the dance hall. When I returned from my trip, he invited me to dinner, not as friends, but as something more. And for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to feel again. He was patient, kind. Unlike Henry, he never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. We danced, we talked for hours, and slowly, effortlessly, love returned to my life. Not the kind of love that demands sacrifice, but the kind that celebrates freedom, individuality, and mutual respect. One night, as we stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he turned to me and asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't hesitate, more than I ever thought possible. And that was the truth. I had lost so much, but in the end, I had gained something much greater. Myself, M.